Hi, and welcome to the latest Evaluate Vantage podcast. We'll be diving into the big upcoming catalysts in biopharma. So all the bits we're going to talk about today are covering the second quarter and mid-year catalysts. I'm Jo Fagg, and I'm the content manager for the Vantage team. And today I'm joined by Amy Brown, Deputy Editor of Vantage.
Hello there.
We're sure you're familiar with Vantage, but if you're not, you can subscribe to our daily email alerts, so you'll receive our take on the latest news about the pharma, biotech and medtech worlds using Evaluate Pharma's data to add further context.
Great. So first up, we are going to be talking about a couple of events for the big pharma group of companies. Starting off with Lilly's donanemab Trailblazer ALPS 2 trial. That is due around mid-year. That has got a primary measure, change from baseline on the Integrated Alzheimer's Disease Rating Scale, or IARDS. That is something of a controversial endpoint. Most trials use the Clinical Dementia Rating Scale, Sum of Boxes, the CDRS scale, which is a more typical primary endpoint and is what was used by Eisai in its Clarity AD study. So there's going to be a lot of focus on that secondary endpoint, as it will allow a better comparison to the earlier studies. Leqembi treated patients performed 27% better than those on the placebo group at 18 months in Clarity AD. So that's the ballpark that donanemab needs to hit. Leqembi heading into an approval on June the 9th to discuss full approval. That's only got accelerated approval at the moment. So lots going on in the Alzheimer's space in the next few months.
So another important space for Lilly is obesity. We've already seen impressive data from Mounjaro, and that looks pretty competitive to Novo's obesity therapy Wegovy on a cross-trial basis. And it looks like Mounjaro's got a cleaner safety profile also. So we're expecting weight loss data from 3 trials of Mounjaro. We've got SURMOUNT-2 in type 2 diabetes patients, SURMOUNT-3 in obese patients, and SURMOUNT-4, which is testing maintenance of weight loss in obese patients. So alongside the earlier SURMOUNT-1 data, which showed a weight loss of just over 20% at 18 months with the highest dose, the data from SURMOUNT-2 will complete a rolling submission, with Lilly hoping for an approval before the end of the year. So obviously, Novo is hoping to protect Wegovy, and it's got a cardiovascular outcome study coming up too, I think mid-year, and that's the SELECT trial in non-diabetic obesity. Now that is powered to detect a 17% benefit with Wegovy over placebo, and that is on a composite endpoint evaluating CV death and non-fatal myocardial infarctional stroke. And it really needs that key CV benefit claim on its label to protect it against the rising competition from Mounjaro.
Yes, I think that's going to be a huge readout for Novo. I think there's some jitters ahead of that expectation is that it will hit, but if that disappoints, that will be a massive blow for Novo. So just moving on to oncology, we've got a couple coming up. The TROP2 ADC from Daiichi and AstraZeneca, datopotamab. I think we mentioned that previously in our previous podcast. That data is still pending. That's from TROPION-Lung01 in second-line non-small cell lung cancer. That's a huge readout. That's probably one of the biggest readouts of the year for the sector, I would say. And also the pivotal trial of the sub-Q Keytruda. That's also in NSCLC. That's the patent or exclusivity extending strategy there. The IV version loses exclusivity possibly in 2028, although probably a bit later than that. But this subcutaneous is seen as a brand extension strategy for Merck. So quite a lot running on that as well.
Okay, now we're going to move on to some of the big biotech catalysts. These are ones market cap of under, or at least $1 billion. First up, we're going to discuss FibroGen's pamrevlumab. That's actually got data in Duchenne's and idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. I'm going to concentrate on the IPF data because that's quite a big market for that product. We've got phase 3 Sapphirus-1 data. The primary is the change in forced vital capacity against placebo. Analysts at Cowen want to see a 39% delta between the arms. So the only approved drugs for IPF are Esbriet, which is Roche's product, and Ovef, which is from Boehringer. And they've got limited efficacy and they have real problems with gastrointestinal side effects. So pamrevlumab needs to meet efficacy and also needs to show a tolerability advantage over these established drugs.
Yes, and also FibroGen under a lot of pressure after the disappointment with roxadustat, their HIF stabilizer. So that pamrevlumab really is a second shot at success for them there. And also in that small or large cap group, we've got Argenx, efgartigimod, also being sold as Vyvgart. There's a subcutaneous formulation in trials in a new setting, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, CIDP. That is a huge potential big new use for Vyvgart, and possibly for the whole class of the FcRn inhibitors. That's I think if this hits, there's some huge numbers behind the FcRn class, and I think this trial really has to succeed to justify some of the big numbers out there, not just for Argenx, but for some of the companies coming along behind. I think that will give the whole kind of class a boost if this trial hits. It's called the ADHERE study. It's quite a complicated study with various measures of efficacy at a couple of stages. Time to first relapse is kind of the final endpoint that we're looking at. That's measured by a disability score called INCAT. Intravenous immunoglobulins is kind of standard of care in CIDP. They're very entrenched and they actually work pretty well. So efgartigimod really needs to be as good as these immunoglobulins to have a chance of grabbing much share of this market.
Okay, and moving on to our last big biotech company we're going to talk about is Bavarian Nordic. We can't go do a podcast without mentioning RSV this year. I mean, it's a very competitive space. They've got phase 3 data with their older adult vaccine. They've just announced that they've completed their enrollment and that data's coming mid-year. It's called the Veneer study. So Moderna looks like the one who have set the bar here. Their vaccine showed an efficacy of 83.7%. And then we've got GSK and Pfizer have both got PDUFA decisions in May. They both had positive AdComs. Moderna is also expected to file soon. And they mentioned recently that they have the option to use a priority review voucher. So that decision could come before the end of the year. And obviously J&J have seen how competitive this space is, and they recently bailed out the race. They shelved their own project. We have been expecting data from them this quarter. So Bavarian could be possibly the fourth to market, and it's going to be a tough space to enter into with all the competitors.
Yes, I think there's a lot of question marks over actually how big that market will be in the long term, and a lot of that will depend how many people are competing for a slice of the market.
Mm-hmm. So now, Amy, you're going to have a look at some of the smaller players with some upcoming data.
Start off with Immunogen. They've got confirmatory data from the Mirasol study to turn Elahere's accelerated approval into a full green light in platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. This is a tough setting to show efficacy. Chemotherapy is really the only thing that's working at the moment, although this is in a niche of patients who are folate receptor alpha positive, or high actually. I think you've got to have a high level of expression. PFS is the endpoint. I think the it's designed to detect a hazard ratio of 0.7%, so that's a 30% reduction in the risk of progression there. And I think the analysts are expecting to see PFS of around 3.5 months in that chemotherapy arm, so probably need about 5 months in the Elahere treated cohort for that trial to succeed. And that will be interesting to Sutro. They've got a slightly less advanced project coming behind that, Noveltamab. They hope to get that down the accelerated approval path. So that, if Mirasol hits, that will probably have a bearing on their plans there.
Okay, and the last catalyst I'm going to talk about is a company called Disc Medicine, and their project bitopertin is a glycine transporter 1 inhibitor, and this is actually a cast off from Roche, who tried lots and lots of studies in schizophrenia, but it didn't work. So now Disc are trying to get bitopertin to work in porphyria, which is a rare metabolic disorder caused by mutations in the genes that produce enzymes of the heme production pathway. So they have patients have extreme pain and their skin damage caused by light. So we've got data coming up from an Australian phase 2 study called Beacon. The primary endpoint here is the percent change from baseline in a metabolite called PPIX, which builds up in the red blood cells. So I'd be interested to see if that works. The only approved therapy for porphyria is Clinuvel Scenesse, and that increases skin melanin to improve light tolerance. So that's the last one from us. You can check out these catalysts and many more in the 3 stories published on our website, which is evaluate.com/Vantage.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to sign up for our daily email alert. Bye for now.